My name's Trevor, owner of Solidshift Concepts, and in this video I'm going to take you on a tour of my mobile solar power system that I've installed in my GX470 here. Let's take a look. So real quick, I just want to discuss why me and my wife chose a solar power system for our off-road camping rig. The biggest push for us was to eliminate our range anxiety we always experienced when traveling with perishable foods in our portable fridge. We previously used this little 500 watt-hour power bank that wouldn't even get us through a night sometimes when using the fridge and a fan together. I went with solar-only charging because I wanted the system to be completely independent from the car's starter battery or alternator. I didn't want to increase the risk of any reliability issues when off in the middle of the woods somewhere. When I'm camping in a dispersed site with no one around, I definitely want my car to start when I expect it to. For a little additional peace of mind, I also keep a jump pack in my car at all times and a satellite communicator in case I get into some real trouble. If you're facing any similar problems, I think now is a great time to begin planning your own mobile solar power system. The cost of these components just keeps plummeting. It's getting easier and easier to do. There's so much information out there, and you can really size your system for any application, no matter the power requirements. Now I'm going to take you back over here, and we're going to get a close look at the details. So before we get into the details of my system, I just wanted to preface that I'm not an electrician, I'm not a professional solar install guy. I'm just a dude with enough access to the internet to make me dangerous. So if you're copying anything I've done here, please make sure you have a full understanding of what's going on before you do anything. Some of the decisions I've made for my system may not be appropriate for the system you're building or in your particular situation. So proceed with caution and do your own research. So from the top level, the system I built is pretty simple. I've got a solar panel that feeds into a solar charge controller. That charges a battery, which can then output to DC power or AC power via an inverter. When I started designing my system, I settled on 12 volts for the nominal voltage, but there are other options to consider. This is one of the first specifications you'll want to decide on when you're starting to build your system, because all the other components will revolve around this. Now I chose 12 volts for my system for a few reasons. Firstly, I wasn't planning on driving any huge electrical loads. Secondly, 12-volt components are super easy to find and pretty affordable. And lastly, I was mainly planning on driving 12-volt automotive accessories anyways, so it was just compatible. Now, the big downside of going with a 12-volt system rather than the higher 24-volt or 48-volt systems that are common out there is that with a lower voltage, each electrical load is going to require more amperage to drive it, which then requires larger gauge wire, which is more expensive, more heavy, and harder to deal with. I'd recommend opting for a 24-volt or 48-volt system if you're planning on driving large electrical loads, or if you have long runs in your system where your wires are going to be very long and expensive. So let's start with the solar panel, which is the star of the show. Gets all the questions, all the talk, you can see it flying on top of the truck when you're at camp. I have a Hyperion 400-watt bifacial solar panel. It's kind of your traditional monocrystalline technology, and it's sized to be a residential panel, so it's about 5.5 feet long by 3.5 feet wide. Because it's the bifacial panel, it can actually generate power from the sunlight hitting either side of the panel, so the front or the back, and if it were in an optimal condition where it was getting light on both sides, it could generate up to 520 watts or so. The panel is also constructed with tempered glass, so it does offer some protection from road debris and hail and that sort of thing. Going into this project, I had a few main goals when selecting the solar panel. First was size. I wanted my entire solar array to fit on the vehicle, specifically on the rooftop tent. That way it's out of the way and I didn't have to stow any bulky panels inside the vehicle, taking up valuable space. With that limited real estate in mind, my next goal was to maximize the amount of power output I could get from that little area. And my last goal for the panel was to just keep the overall cost of the unit down. Knowing that solar cells are basically a commodity at this point, I didn't want to spend 3 to 4 times the cost on a panel that was advertised as being for overlanding or RV use. Instead, I just went to a wholesaler who sold me a couple residential panels for factory pricing, basically. If this panel happens to fail prematurely due to shock or vibration or whatever, I'm not too worried about it. I could buy multiple of these panels before I even came close to spending what it costs to buy a dedicated off-road vehicle-based solar panel. And I've had this thing on the truck for a year, and I've taken it camping plenty of times, been down plenty of rough trails, and I've not had a single issue with it. If you're looking to select a solar panel for your system, I think two of the biggest factors to consider are the voltage output of the solar panel and then the power output of the solar panel. As far as voltage is concerned, you really just have to make sure that the output voltage of your panel or your array is higher than the charging voltage of your battery bank. Otherwise, you'll have to implement some sort of boost charger that can raise that output voltage from the panels to give the battery enough voltage to charge. In my case, my panel could theoretically supply anywhere between 37 and 47 volts, which is way higher than the 14.4 volt threshold my battery requires. Now for power, you really got to make sure that the expected output of your panel is enough to keep up with the loads you expect to apply to your system. So if on average you're consuming more energy in a day than your panel can be expected to produce in that same day, you're going to run out of power eventually. I built a quick spreadsheet to help me kind of wrap my head around some of these numbers. If you guys want to take a look at that and use it for your own systems, feel free to visit the link in the description. I'll have it available for download. Now, as far as physically mounting the solar panel to the top of the tent, that was a bit of a challenge. I ended up making a frame for the solar panel out of aluminum extrusion and then attaching that to one side of the tent with custom-made brackets and some hinges. The other side of the solar panel frame is secured to the top of the tent with some over-center latches. This pivoting configuration allows me to prop the solar panel up at 30 degrees with these rods, which has a few advantages. The primary reason for doing this was I needed to be able to get the lid of the tent up easily and have it stay up under the force of its own gas struts. Because the weight of the propped solar panel is more centered over the hinges of the tent, it's much easier to get the tent lid up and have it stay up once that thing is propped. This hinged arrangement has the added benefit of allowing me to collect more sunlight for power generation. So if the sun's not directly overhead, I can locate the vehicle and prop the panel towards the sun. Also, if you remember, the panel's bifacial, so it can collect sunlight from the back side. By having the panel propped up, I'm able to capture a little bit of ambient light on that back side of the panel. Another major component of this system is the battery. I ended up going with a Lifetime 200 amp hour 12 volt lithium iron phosphate battery with a built-in 100 amp BMS, which is a battery management system, which is basically the battery's brain, and it also has built-in heating pads to help it heat up in really cold temperatures. So I chose a battery with a lithium iron phosphate chemistry because it's one of the newer battery technologies to hit the consumer market, and it has a bunch of advantages. For one, you can discharge the battery all the way down to 0% charge without damaging it over and over again. This chemistry is also way more safe and stable than lithium-ion batteries. This chemistry also gives the battery a really long usable life, so it can go through 10,000 charge and discharge cycles easily and last 10 years. The practical operating temperatures for this battery also fell within a reasonable range for my region. It can be charged between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it can be discharged in a wider range between -4 Fahrenheit and up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. I monitored the internal temperatures of my cabin for about a month during the summer before I bought the battery, and I determined that the temperatures inside the car where the battery is going to be installed never exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit. When going to select a battery of your own, I'd recommend focusing on these three main factors first to help establish what you need. First again would be the voltage. You got to make sure that your battery bank voltage matches the required input voltage of all your downstream components. And as mentioned before, you also have to make sure that your battery bank charging voltage is lower than the voltage coming in from your solar panel. You also have to think about power output. So this is where the battery limits the outgoing current to your loads. You have to make sure that the current draw of all your combined loads does not exceed what your battery's BMS is rated to output, or else the battery will shut itself down. In my case, I only expected my typical continuous load to be about 10 amps, but if I used the full output of my 1200 watt inverter, I could see up to 100 amps continuous. Considering this, I decided that the 100 amp BMS on my battery was going to be acceptable. The third main factor to consider is the energy storage capacity of the battery. You have to make sure that the energy it can store is enough to power all of your expected loads through any periods where you're not receiving a charge from the sun. It's also important to take into account that not all days are sunny like this one, and a lot of campsites are in shaded areas. If just using a small portable fridge like mine, the 200 amp hour battery will get you a couple days down the road with no sun. I've had my fair share of dreary days at the campsite, and it's had no trouble keeping our food cold. Now, mounting the battery inside the cabin was important because you don't want a 40-pound brick flying around the car as you're driving. So I welded together this simple steel frame that I'm able to strap the battery down to with some cam straps. As you can see, I removed the rear passenger seat, so now this frame is mounted to the bracket where the seat used to attach. This keeps the battery located securely out of the way, right behind the passenger seat, and this frame also has an upper tray that accommodates the fridge. Obviously, the battery and solar panel do me no good if they're not connected to each other and I can't tap into that stored energy. This is where the electrical panel comes in. It's the central hub that ties the solar input and the battery output together, and it's all contained quite nicely right up here on this Victory 4x4 Molly panel that's mounted to the rear window. I went with the Victory 4x4 panel because it seemed to have the most solid lower mounting point, using riv nuts to attach to the body structure behind the plastic panels down here. Now you'll see that the electrical devices aren't actually directly connected to the Molly panel. Instead, they're kind of stood off from the Molly panel using this intermediate ABS plastic panel that I designed. This insulates everything from the chassis and also made it way more easy to wire everything up outside the vehicle, test it, and then install it in the vehicle. I just had to throw it up on a few studs that were pre-installed on the Molly panel and tighten the nuts down and connect the battery and solar panel. Taking a look at the input side of everything, the first component you see coming off of the solar panel is just a 25 amp breaker. It's kind of an automotive grade breaker, and I'm using it primarily as just a solar disconnect. I could have used a double pole DC breaker here, but I didn't feel it was absolutely necessary due to the low voltage and current produced by my single solar panel. This feeds into my Victron 100 volt 50 amp MPPT solar charge controller, which then gets tied into the main bus bar of the system through a 50 amp automotive breaker. This bus bar is where all the power inputs and outputs meet with the battery. The battery is charged from this node. When looking at solar charge controllers, I would highly recommend getting one that's an MPPT. This simply means it's going to extract as much power as possible from the sun, and you'll get the most out of your investment. For sizing the input voltage and output current of your solar charge controller, I'd recommend taking a look at this calculator that's linked below that was made by Explorist Life. It makes it super easy to figure out which one you need. You'll notice that throughout this system, I've chosen to install all Victron components. This is because I wanted the highest level of reliability out of my system, and I also didn't want to install some Chinese app in order to monitor all my devices on my phone. If you're not as concerned about these factors, then there's plenty of other known brands out there such as Renogy or Booge RV that make these components. Now taking a look at how the system outputs power, directly connected to the battery, you'll find a 125 amp terminal fuse. This protects the rest of the circuit from the battery output in case something shorts. From there, the positive cable connects directly to a disconnect switch from Blue Sea Systems. The negative terminal of the battery is wired to a Victron BMV12 Smart Shunt, which monitors the energy coming in and out of the battery and keeps an eye on the battery state of charge. It then displays all the information on this LCD screen right here. The same information is actually all available on the Victron mobile app. However, it is nice being able to take a quick look back here and see what the state of charge of the battery is. From there, the battery is tied to the main bus bar of the system, which I mentioned earlier. Power is then distributed to a 12 volt fuse box from Blue Sea Systems that powers all of my automotive accessories. Power is also distributed to a 1200 watt Victron Phoenix pure sine wave inverter that allows me to connect any household appliances that require 120 volts. When shopping for an inverter, I definitely recommend picking one up that offers a pure sine wave. This most closely matches the power characteristics found in your house, so all of your household appliances will function better. Also, 1200 watts of inverter output is approaching what's practically possible with a 12 volt system. Any higher and the size of the hookup wires just becomes very large, expensive, and hard to work with. If you know you're going to need more power output from your inverter on your system, I would recommend just going ahead and jumping up to a 24 volt or 48 volt system even. Taking a look at some of the equipment we power with our system, all we really connect most of the time is our portable 12 volt fridge from Booge RV. From time to time, we'll plug in the occasional strand of bistro lights. Sometimes we'll hook up a box fan when camping on warm nights, or a diesel heater when camping on cold nights. In the future, I could see us hooking up a Starlink or something to extend our trips and allow us to still connect back to the world. Now taking a quick look at routing power into and out of the system. Firstly, from the solar panel, I've taken the cables. I've gone ahead and ran them down into the rear hatch of the vehicle. You'll see I've added a drip loop and then ran it right into the loom where the rear hatch door connects to the vehicle. Now for getting power out of the vehicle to your favorite accessories quickly and easily, I've made this cool window insert panel that has a module that allows you to pass an extension cord through and then close the door behind it to keep it nice and sealed up. These window insert panels will actually be available for the GX and other platforms on my website, Solidshiftconcepts.com, very soon. So be sure to keep an eye out on our social media for our official release. Before we move on from this section and on to the total cost of the build, I did want to make one more note. It is extremely important to size your wire and fuses appropriately for any current that's expected in any branch of the circuit. If this isn't done correctly, electrical fires are extremely likely. It's also really good practice to keep a fire extinguisher in your vehicle in a very easily accessible location in case anything does go wrong. All right, so let's quickly run through what this system cost me. I've got some numbers here with me because I built this about a year ago and nothing's really fresh in my head. For the solar panel, I bought it from a local wholesaler at $120. Moving on to the Lifetime battery, I bought that for $682. The inverter was $334. Charge controller was $180. The battery monitor was $158. My Blue Sea System's main disconnect was $24, and the 12-volt fuse block was $45. The two automotive circuit breakers in the system cost me about $85. The aluminum extrusion and hardware required to build the solar panel frame was about $290. I had the custom electrical panel, solar panel brackets, solar panel prop rods, solar panel wind deflector, and the fridge tray and tie downs, all made by Send Cut Send. Those ran me about $375 in total. The rear window molly panel, like I said before, was from Victory 4x4, and at the time that was about $215. I had a variety of miscellaneous components and hardware I had to buy as well, bringing me to a grand total of about $3,900. This was also my first time working with such large gauge cables, so I had to spend 60 more bucks on some specialty tools. They were a cable stripping knife, a large pair of wire cutters, and a hammer crimp for installing large terminals on wires. I did also want to mention a few vendors I was really pleased with using for this project. I'm not sponsored by them or affiliated with them in any way, but here they are in no particular order. Firstly, I have tnuts.com, which was a great source for cheap aluminum extrusions and the associated mounting brackets and hardware. Send Cut Send has been awesome for getting quick turnaround on some custom sheet fabricated parts. Current Connected was a great resource for heavy gauge cable that's already pre-assembled and pre-terminated. And of course, honorable mention to McMaster Car, because they always have the hardware you can't find locally. Now, a pro tip for sourcing your solar panels, I'd highly recommend taking a look at Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist for any local warehouses or wholesalers in your area that are looking to get rid of solar panels at, factory pricing. Almost all the electrical components for this project, outside of what I've already mentioned, were purchased from Amazon. Now, I do have to caution you, when shopping on Amazon for electronic stuff, be sure to buy from only trusted brands and trusted storefronts that you know you're going to get the actual product and the actual quality that you're looking for. There's tons of counterfeits and fakes and rip-offs on Amazon, so just be sure you don't get bit. You should be especially mindful when purchasing wire off of Amazon. A lot of the stuff out there just has copper-clad aluminum conductor, which isn't as good as tinned copper, so keep an eye out for that. Also, when buying wire to connect your solar panel, you want to make sure it's PV rated. That way they can stand up to all the UV radiation they're being hit with, and they're also weather resistant. Lastly, I just wanted to shout out a great resource I used throughout this build. It's a YouTube channel called DIY Solar Power by Prowse, and it's just an infinite wealth of knowledge. I can't suggest it enough. He also has a website that's super easy to navigate that has tons of information. It's linked down below. It's called mobilesolarpower.com. And that's about all I had to say about this system. I hope you really enjoyed. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to help you in the comments below, or you can email me at contact@solidshifconcepts.com. Thanks.